All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 15th episode of the RK Leadership Podcast, where we help empower tomorrow's leaders through sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. My name is Rob Cameronpour, and my special guest today is JF Guay, who is a seasoned professional with 25 years of experience in the dynamic world of the telecom industry. I'm going to let JF, introduce himself briefly as well as I do with all my guests. But before he does that, I want to thank you, JF, for taking the time to be on the RK Leadership Podcast. And I look forward to, going through various topics with you today.
Well, thanks, Rob, for having me. I'm really super excited to be here as well. And I just love to share stories and concept on leadership and everything that goes with it. So to go back to my story, as you said, I've been around the block a few times in the telecom industry. I'm currently the senior manager of project delivery. And our team's mission is mostly around getting the operations team ready to take on new tasks or modified tasks based on contracts we sign with different customers. Typically, which have different requirements than what our product catalog typically offers. And as we know, that's part change management, there's technical stuff. And what I really like about what my team is able to do is that we tend to be like in the center of things, and we're able to see the entire enterprise because we may impact one department or another. So we have a real holistic sense of what it takes to run a company and what impacts things or another. So it's of course very challenging but very rewarding where when a plan comes together and everything works and your customer's happy, your operations teams are happy. I mean, that's just wonderful. Now, that's not where I thought I'd be in my career, because when I started, actually, I'm an engineer. That's what I trained for. Nice. And when I came out to school, I know I had some affection, if I could say, for the network. Right, the local network and how things, how information gets transferred. And so I thought, or my plan was to become a technical expert. In that industry, multiple manufacturers have certifications, and depending on what you were looking for, you would aspire to get in a certain very senior level. So you get to work on things that are more and more complex. So that's what I tried the first few years. Always trying to seek out mentors and who are the experts and understand how they do it so I could gain that experience. But throughout the years, what I figured is that I was having more fun leading people. Now, those first years was virtual teams, right? I was the technical expert in the team, but I had technicians, I had project managers, we had the customers, right? And I found that somehow the way I showed up enabled the teams to work better, understand each other, because in technology there's so many aspects, and typically each aspect has its own language, and you somehow need to become a universal translator, right? And right. So I had some success around it and say, hey, maybe I can explore that. And that led me then to start leading teams in the second half of my career, and sometimes even have the privilege of creating new teams. Because as we all know, the telecom, the electronics, the whole technology industry has been changing so much in the last couple of years. So you do have to change teams, adapt, and that brings whole new great challenges, both from service providers, the telcos, and even the customers themselves that leverage this technology in their day-to-day business. So hence why right now, after all these years, I'm really trying to see how I can provide and share my knowledge to others, because that is really something that fires me up. I love doing that, and I just want to do it more and more. And young leaders or other leaders or anyone else, right? Because as we say, leadership is not just for the workplace.
That's right. Awesome. That's definitely a great story, JF. So I'm going to dive right into the leadership aspect. This is something I question, and being, having to work in an engineering environment, and yourself being an engineer, I want to ask you this question, as you were the technical expert. Can you walk me through that transition of being that technical expert to the leadership, And what are your thoughts in some organizations who forced those technical experts in those leadership roles, thinking that, just because they're that technical expert, they could lead a team?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. And what I'd say is that when you're a technical expert, you do build your self-confidence, right? That you know, well, I can do it, and you're actually not giving orders, but you're giving instructions to the different team members because you know how it's supposed to look like, what the end result is, and you just give the information. And there's no like human resource or team management per se in there. It's just, well, here are the instructions, make it happen. And I think when you go in a true leadership perspective, you gotta put that away. Yes, your technical knowledge will allow you to maybe better understand the reality of the work, but managing people in their career path, their day-to-day activities, and their progression is a whole different set of skill set there. So you have to be careful, not think that you're an expert, then you'll be an expert no matter what you do. You have to be very humble about it. And I certainly got a few lessons in that in the beginning, right? As you think you know because you've had success, so it's just natural that you're going to continue on. And yeah, life has a way to telling you and bringing you back. It says, nope, it's a completely different way. And as you move up or you have more and more challenges, you got to really understand how human nature works, conflict resolution, planning. How do you set up a great collaboration space for people to actually want to work with you, especially when you also have virtual leadership responsibilities where you got to influence and you got to people to do things that it's not you're not their leader, but the job still needs to get done, and it has to be done in a right way. So it's really about understanding that technical leadership, if we can say, and people leadership are very different skill sets. And I guess in both cases, and I was extremely lucky, even in the technical side, to have extremely humble experts, right? I think that would help me get great role models early on in my career. So I didn't get inflated head or, on that just because I had success. I had very great examples of people, your knowledge, you may be even known by industry, but so what? You're still a guy or a girl, and respect is important.
Absolutely. Awesome. So what would your advice be to organizations who have these technical experts and they do want to transition them into leadership? How would they go about doing that? What's the best way of doing that, JF?
I would say through two things. For depending on the background, because some engineers may have some business knowledge or training, but definitely a leadership program. I've seen this in several organizations very successfully, when they actually know where these people start from and where you want to go. And these are leadership programs typically that should be tailored to what these people are actually going to give, they're going to do every day. So that's for sure is, that gives you the skill sets, the things you need to know and understand about the world. But that alone will not provide success. You absolutely also need to make sure that you connect them to coaches and mentors, ideally in an enterprise, because they're going to help you your way. And I think this two-phase approach is what, at least in my career, helped me a lot make that transition and progression. Just one or just the other may not give you the entire tool belt you need to move forward. Yeah,
that's right. And throughout that journey, the experience and practice helps as well. And
yes.
Having said that, I want you to take us back to your first leadership role, and I want you to talk about how you were starting off as a leader, and how good of a leader were you when you started, and what did you need to make improvements on, and how did you go about figuring out how to make those improvements, and when did you reflect to say, okay, I need to improve in X, Y, and Z?
Yep. Well, the first, I guess one of the first jobs as a leader I saw is that I was maybe I'll call it the old way, very directive, authoritative, deciding everything, telling people what to do, and I'm the boss, and you do what I say. And It's actually not quite my personality. I'm actually someone that's passionate about people, and I want everyone to like me. So I was getting the point as well. I'm a good leader because my team is doing what they're supposed to do, but the people in it don't seem to be very happy, or they complain, and that's what got me as a feedback loop is where I'm doing something wrong here, and that's influencing the wrong way for your own people. And then you realize that you're also putting a burden on yourself of doing everything, right? You can't. And although people all look up to you, that says, well, you must have all the answers, so make it happen. The reality is that's the whole team that has these riches that need to share. They all have the skill sets and things special from their past experience that they're bringing that you really have to leverage. So I guess it took me a couple of leadership jobs before I actually, finally understood, a humble or servant leader. Make sure that, if you need something in a team, it can be, as simple as a new form that you need to count information, or a new document when you're actually documenting the things that you're delivering. Well, why not have the people that are doing this job collaborate or even prime that? And the first time I did that, I almost fell off my chair because it was incredible what I got. I never thought, I say I've always been under that impression in my early leadership years that I actually had to drive it all and give it to them. And boy, was I wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. You have a team, and, the famous social media post that keeps making the rounds, right? I think it's attributed to Steve Jobs, is that, you don't hire, great people to tell them what to do, right? And so more and more as I've leveraged people, and then even then in a coaching or mentoring perspective, helping them grow, I've grown as a leader as well, and then taken on other responsibilities and getting more impact in the organization. But again, thanks to my teams, and providing a very good, healthy dose of humility.
100%. No, that's
Yeah.
excellent, JF, and that's a great way to put it. Now, you talked about your passion of creating teams, so I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that. Why do you love creating these teams? What are some important points that you like to share in terms of creating these teams, and what process do you follow?
Sure. And so just like my early leadership experience, I also had early team creation leadership where I also made bad decisions. And I guess that's how you learn, right? My whole career and even my technical expertise was built upon me making mistakes. And thankfully, I was in the right place in organizations and have great leaders around me that, took me back up and set me back on track. So what I saw, why I like teams, creating teams, is actually because I like creating, period. Right? You in the background, you may see some Legos, and yes. I just like, but I like starting things. That is really what I love. And teams, of course, is one thing, because in my case, those teams were created in response to a need, right? New industry changes, special requirements from our customers or internal initiatives. And it's exciting because you get to be a pioneer in a field. And that I loved it a lot. Now, there are right and wrong ways to do it. And here are a few things I've learned not to do. One thing is that when you create, for sure, your mission has to be very clear, right? You can't make it up every day. And that's been a problem for me, especially brand new, is that, yeah, let's see tomorrow, and then you change your mind 15 times, and then your new team just gets totally confused of what exactly they're supposed to do. The other, and this I've made some mistakes even recently, right? Is that broadening your mission too vastly, meaning that now your team is responsible for so many things that it's just not possible for them to deliver. And lastly, as a short list, is when you are deciding who you should hire and even setting expectations for new teams, you have to be careful of not always setting those metrics based on the best. Because in my experience, or at least what I've done when you pioneer a new team, you typically get people that are extremely autonomous. They know their stuff, and you start with a very small core, right? 2-3 people, and they get things done. Now, if you set the team objectives based on these people, you might never find, your next team members, or make it unrealistic for the other people, right? You, in a team, you really need a mix of both. Your high performers, people that are good day in, day out to do what's expected to them, and that makes it that you don't discourage your teams of, well, I know you're doing this, but I want you to do that, because that's what we did 6 months ago when we were 3. Yeah, great, JF, but that's unrealistic, right? You got to learn from that. And so those are the mistakes I've done previously that I've learned now. And then you need to find a right balance. Now, that does not mean that you have to lower your expectations, right? To make sure that everyone is able to succeed. But you do need to just balance, make sure that between high-performing people and what actually needs to be done in the space. So those are things to avoid. The things to do, though, is, again, as I said earlier, is your mission. Understand what the goal of your team is, and have a great roadmap of how you get there, because typically that team will not be operational in the next weeks or months. You have to build your team, and normally there's also new skill sets that these people have to learn, either technical, process oriented, or even leadership skill sets or communication skill set they need to build out to make that role come to light and really reach the objectives that the organizations for which you work for need your team to perform at.
That's right. And I think that's so important in terms of, I love how you said the mix, because, having too much of one versus the other, it creates some conflict at times. But, I love that mix analogy, and it's important to have, the different strengths, bench strengths. Somebody's good at one thing, you need to complement, people's abilities and knowledge. So that's great. Now, creating teams is one thing, JF. Sustaining teams is another challenge as well. What would you say is important in the sustainment piece, and how do you get your teams to be engaged?
Yeah, that's a great challenge we do face. You're right. The early on, the excitement of, hey, it's a new team and we're in the jungle with our machete and making our way forward. That's a certain type of energy, and some people crave that all the way through. And that's where you get engagement can sometimes fall for certain of your team members, right? That it's no longer exciting, because then it becomes the same thing every day. So you need to be in tune as your leader with your different team members, right? What do they like? What are their aspirations in the goal, in their career, or even personal life? Because sometimes you can create a role for them, or be on the lookout for other opportunities. But for sure, you got to keep meeting with them regularly. Make sure that they are happy in their role. They understand the mission. The mission continues to evolve as well, right? It's rare for a team to do the same thing for 10 years in a row. But you're adding new responsibilities or changing them, and it's really keeping them in the loop. Again, not doing the past mistake of deciding everything on your own with your other leaders. Involve your team at what it keeps it interesting. And sometimes that has nothing to do with the job itself. It's maybe setting up a session, a Monday session, how was your weekend, people? And it gets more of a family type of flavor to it. Yes. And that, I think I had that a lot in the past. And this family type of relationship was really great, because then when things are rough, well, yeah, but my people are there. It's going to be fun anyway. And it irons the kinks of everyday challenges we may have. So yeah, definitely keep close to your people. As your leader, you should be able to recognize when things are not looking great. And we're not talking just about metrics, right? A lot of organizations tend to measure pretty much everything. Yes. And yes, but morale is very difficult to measure with numbers. And so be sure if someone's not as motivated as they used to, or they're complaining a lot, right? And for all levels of the team, yeah, be on the lookout. And sometimes some great nuggets of knowledge or even ideas can come out of that, and leverage it to make your team even better in the future.
That's right. And, sticking to that, JF, how do you create cultures within, the organization's got a big culture. It's got a culture of its own, but, as you dive in within teams, you can create your own kind of culture within the teams. So just focusing on your own culture within, your control, how do you create that culture where, your team doesn't wake up Monday morning and say, oh shit, I gotta go to work, it's Monday, and instead are excited to go in, like you said, where there's that family dynamic there? How do you create that?
Yeah, you really do need to create that sense of belonging. And trust me, and for everyone listening, it's not easy. And sometimes the industry, the organization, or just the world in general, hey, we had a pandemic, right? Just throws things at you that will make it even for yourself, you don't want to go to work, right? So you have to find, your why. Why am I going to work, right? And hence that's why in doing so, it's all about creating that relationship through sessions, meetings, getting personal to a point with your different individuals, some more and less, and I guess bring them to the team, right? Say, hey, you're an artist, you're a musician, you love renovating, share with that, right? And it makes it interesting. So maybe the job is a bit boring that day or difficult, but I know I have a half-hour break during lunch, and I'm going to hear, about Bob talking about he restores trucks for has a hobby, and that's a fun piece, right? And I think that's what helps us, because if you're too focused on just a job and something goes wrong, you become unbalanced, and that is a recipe for big problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, again, when, part of creating teams is obviously the interview process. Something I've spoken about and shared in my content on my social media content is about the traditional interview process and, the typical questions and whatnot. How do you conduct your interviews to ensure that you pick the right candidate for that role?
Well, my personal strategy is always to hire a person, a personality. Of course, they need some basic skill sets, and certain things that I know from experience, that depending on the level, I'm going to hire this person that I need to look at. But when you're hiring people, and we're going back to how we keep people engaged, right? It needs to fit in, right? Unless you are hiring these people just to change everything, but that's really rare. So I'm reading to someone that's going to fit in, that ties into the same philosophy that I like. Again, humility, experience. In my line of work, you have to be very uncomfortable in being uncomfortable, because as a universal translator, you are maybe a master of none and jack of all trades, right? And you have to know that you're relying on your leadership and your knowledge to drive people forward, even though you may not even know anything about what you're actually going to be doing, but that's not the point. So yeah, going back, so making sure that I understand how this person thinks, right? So typically I'll give them situations. Not, can you, here are 5 dots, and can you make a box out of me? And then, oh, yes, the great out of the box thinking. No. I want a person, someone that I can relate to. I'm not there to make a friend, though. It's not a speed dating exercise. But, yeah, I want to see in how personal this person is responding to me, as well as, are they shy in front of me? Are they willing to open up? And because we're going to be every day in the trenches with this person, and I want them to be a great addition to the team. And typically I haven't been wrong many times. Sometimes your feeling was just at the wrong place that day, but I've done well, because that personality is something that you pretty much can't really change. Skills you can learn, you can finesse, you can revector, but for me, I'm really about hiring a person, not a resume, because I feel there's so much pressure sometimes that people just engineer the hell out of their CV for
Yes.
right, thinking that may help. I'm sure for the automated recruiters, the bots out there, but for me, I typically ask HR, just turn everything off. I want 100% of everything. Let me read it and get a sense, and with our experience, right, in the industry, then you're able, your spidey sense get sharpened, and you can say you can very quickly see someone who's pretending to be what they are, and at the other spectrum, people that are maybe great resources, but they don't even know it themselves, but you're able to see them, and those are really the people you want to hire.
That's right. So having said that, JF, what would you personally change with the traditional interview process? What would you recommend to the HR folks out there? How do we do things different to get the right people in the right seat?
Yeah, I've seen some of the creative things in the HR department I work with. I do like the video interviews where someone can the pre-interview, right? So that instead of just sending their CV and by email or whatever system, is that they all actually record a video. So you're obviously that personality again, right? You can see some of it through video, right?
Yes.
And they also tended to ask things about their personal, right? Like, what do you do outside of work? What are your hobbies? Again, it brings us a good view of who this person is outside of their diplomas and their certifications, where, for me, certifications is, you passed an exam, great. It doesn't tell me that you're actually good at it, even though if you recognize, right? Not saying that they're useless. It's just that you have to be careful. You can't rely on just the certification for that. So really the video part, I really love that one. And then it's having activities and challenge these people, show me how you think, how you lead, right? So in some of the things I've done, as I said, right, you present them with a challenge, right? Well, this is what I'm doing. It'd be nice that this challenge is somehow related to what they could be doing, but not necessarily. And it helps see people how they decompose a challenge, how what's the thought process from going to one step to the other. And even if they know nothing, it doesn't matter, right? If they have a great way of thinking, they'll be able to expose the solution. Whether it's good or bad doesn't really matter. It's how do you get there? And I think that those two things for me were the best differentiators and the most fun I've had in interviewing and seeing people.
Nice. No, I definitely like the thought process part, because it also shows how clearly they can think, and how clear their mind is versus somebody that's it's got so much clutter in their mind and they can't kind of piece things together. So that's a great point, JF. I really like that, and I actually love the video resume instead. And I think we have to be shifting towards this innovative idea of the hiring process versus the old CVs. And I think you're bang on in terms of people embellishing their CVs. Now you've got AI there, which even it enables them to do a wonderful job and put some nice stuff on their CV. But when you see it, you kind of question to see if it's actually them that put it together. And I recently had somebody send me an email, which was I'm pretty sure it was created by ChatGPT, because where there was brackets to insert something, they forgot to clear that off or fill it out. And I just shook my head. I actually circled it and sent it back to them for them to. But great points there, JF. Now, with creating teams, and you've lived through this for in your career, I want to talk about new grads versus existing employees. And again, throughout the creation and building that you've developed, how do we set up new grads for success? What's the recipe there, JF?
Sure. For one, I think is treating them as adults. For one, is like, they're coming out of university. They may or may not have any experience in their future job, because they worked at McDonald's, that was a store, and I hope people actually accept that this is actually great experience if you are willing to look at it.
Yes.
You don't judge because of that, right? They actually went and got a job. Some had the opportunity to do internships, which of course great, yeah. but give them a chance, right? And don't, when I say treat them as adults, is don't treat them like a kid that's coming into, they have ideas, they have aspirations. So when you interview them, right, and what I was using as the examples, right, with the thought process, I think that is great for new grads, right? Because they can't necessarily tell you, I don't know, how an airplane is built, but they can tell you, well, yeah, you know, you have to put passengers on, and then you take off, and then you land, and great. So that's your thought process, because we will help you as a new grad, you know, learn the skills that you could not learn at school. And, you know, industries have many training opportunities for sure, right? So that's for at least in the interviewing space. Also, I've seen a lot of organizations actually have new grad leadership programs. I think more and more that's taking root into the bigger organizations. And I think that is really an incredible initiative, because what it does is it allows these students, right, knowing that they're not going to be applying to the regular front door where you're judged like an adult, right? Not the juvenile court, if I could say, right, is like you're being judged against people that may have 15, 20 years experience, right? No, you're judged as a creative mind that's coming in. It's your first or likely your first job, and be treated as such, right? Welcomed, nourished, right? Because a new grad typically, you know, maybe needs more attention than someone that's been in the industry or at work for a few more years, right? Those people know, you know, how a boss works, and leaders, and the good and bad, and HR department, and you know, the billing and whatever. The others have not, likely new grads have not been exposed to that. So the great leadership programs actually take these people across the organizations and have them meet people, and sometimes even make rounds, right? Do a 2-month here and a 2-month there, and you go and do different departments, so you have a 360 view of the company. Then aside from exposing them to the actual departments, expose them to executives. Because when you're saying, you know, like a new grad leadership, because we're in a leadership podcast here, you're actually getting these people to be your next leaders. So you can actually be, you know, one of the hosts of the program. You've just hired someone out of university, but you may actually be looking at your next VP, right? So you have to help these people. And so bringing them to the execs, no matter how big your organization is, right? These future leaders need the correct grooming and attention. And so if they are able to talk with the CEO, even if it's for half an hour, right? It gives them, again, aspirations and understanding. It can motivate people. It can ignite their passion. Even though not everyone will become the CEO, it's still, I think, like a respect, and says, I don't feel like I'm number 25, 36. You know, I've actually talked to the CEO, and, you know, not many people have been able to do that. And once they're in I call the program, make sure that you tie them up with a coach and mentor, same as the other employees, right? But those mentors have to focus on the fact that they're new grads and they're starting their career. So you have to mentor them in that way. You're not mentoring them at the current moment for becoming the national director of something. No, they're building their leadership, they're building their skill sets. And sometimes, in my personal experience, because I've had the honor of participating in such a program, is bring patience, right? Sometimes early on in career, I've been guilty of that. Is like, you want to go high very soon. Wait a minute. You know, take it in. Sometimes some people will make it fast up the chain, great, but, you know, smell the roses, take a look. There's a lot more to your work than just being the next level, right? Yeah, I think that's the most important thing, is keeping these people engaged. Don't hire and promise someone, says, man, you're my next VP, so it's wonderful, you know, at the career fairs, and then you find out they're like doing photocopies, right? And oh, come on. What do these people do? They just leave, and then they also infect the rest of the market. Says, well, don't go there, man, because they promise you incredible stuff, but then just to have you photocopy stuff. You know, I'm exaggerating, of course, but some people are stuck in those low level things, and not letting them feel that there's any way, you know, to out of that.
Yes. No, I think those are excellent points, JF. I really love the exposure to the executives. I think that for some people who aspire to be leaders one day, it does burn a fire underneath them. And I remember along my journey, I created that for myself, and it actually did wonders. It opens your eyes to a lot of different things, and just hearing those perspectives from that level, uh, it really motivates you at times to do that. So I love that. You touch up on the mentorship and coaching, very important. I don't think there's enough mentorship in a lot of organizations to say, you got to remember, these are brand new, folks from schools that just came in with almost zero experience for most of them. They do need some guidance and hand holding at times to develop them, and everybody wants to be developed. So you have to put a lot of focus and energy into new grads. And also, I want to hear your perspective and this is something that really bugs me is, like you said, we treat them like kids. So when you're sitting in a big meeting and making decisions, and how important is it to include them in that decision making, JF?
For me, it is, and that touches on the topic of intergenerational teams, right? That is a challenge where, yeah, you have new grads, you have people that are in middle of their career, and others that are near their retirement, and it's a whole thing that you have to mix. And one thing you do have to be careful, though, based on my experience, is put too much energy on your new grad, right? Because then people are going to start getting jealous. But definitely, yes, to show everyone that they are part of the team, right?
Yes.
If they're there, it's because we chose them, and their lack of experience can certainly be made up with how they think, how they show up, and they're great ideas, right? That's what the wonderful thing of getting people from different spaces, that they come in with a very different way of thinking, right? And especially with university, where people are growing to learn new techniques, new tools, and they challenge you. And I've been challenged a couple of times, right? As a, yeah, I know you've been doing this for 20 years, but we can do this now, and it's much better. And yeah, that's right. So it's a healthy debate. And
Yes.
certainly, though, I've been very protective of my resources, right? Just because I know some people say, yeah, but you're young, especially when you put them in leadership roles very early on, even if it's virtual, right? Is how not everyone likes to be led by a 23-year-old, right?
Yes.
When you're leading people that some even have 40 years of experience, it's like, who the hell are you to tell me what we're going to do? But if they're coached properly, they will show up and people will collaborate, right? It's a team effort.
That's right.
You can't leave them in the wild. That's the worst thing you can do.
Absolutely. And that, JF, is a totally different podcast. I can talk about that for an hour. And it's a big controversy in a lot of places where you've got the young people leading the older generation, and there's a lot of friction at the beginning that's created. And how do you melt that ice away? So I don't want to get into that. I've got a few other things that I want to dive into. One is, we went through the pandemic, and I don't think people really realize how leaders deal with stress and anxiety. And I wanted to take I want to hear from you as a leader, throughout all these years. How did you deal with, how did you handle stress and anxiety that, leaders don't rarely talk about?
Sure. And as I said, I learned by mistakes. So what did that look early on, or even in the middle of my career, was me exhibiting very unprofessional behavior. Because when you're not, like, mental health is something that is rather new in the space, right? So the legacy way of thing is, well, you keep it to yourself, because then you're vulnerable, and it's not going to look, you're not going to be looked at for promotions because, oh, you're broken, or you have something. So I kept inside and was not able to recognize, what the first or early signs of a burnout or things like that. So that's how I learned, right? So I completely broke down, and I was sometimes like big arguments with my leader, just to realize that wait a minute. So that's the way, first of all, is recognize the early signs or even the signs that things are not going well. Right? Being unprofessional, that's not what you're supposed to do. Waking up and being scared of showing up work, right? That's where the anxiety attack sometimes gets you in the morning. Is, oh man, before the first meeting, you have to recognize the physical characteristics of that. And then you have to get help, or either training or professionals, depending on how high your anxiety is, right? Because I'm not a psychologist by any way. I know how to deal with my anxiety, but some people that you're in extreme levels, please do go and see a professional. They'll help you. But that being said, is when you recognize the sign, then stop and really understand what the cause is. I know early on, it was all about anything that impacted my reputation, right? Is sometimes, no fault of anyone, you're in a situation where things are not going as they're supposed to, but you're the leader of that. And so if that thing is not getting delivered as expected on time or the way they expected, in my mind, at least, as well, that means it equates to JF not being good. Even though I did a great job, it's just the ecosystem around me didn't allow me to do a good job, right? So yeah, reputation was something that I was very focused on. So once it says you have the signs, you have to take a step back, and once you do get the actual causes, then deal with it. Sometimes it's all about you're feeling overwhelmed. Okay, why? Right? Well, that's maybe because you actually have too much on your plate, or are you managing your time improperly? Right? Because sometimes maybe you're not efficient at all. You have too many meetings or meetings to plan another meeting, and things don't get done, so they pile up. And then the expectations from your own leadership or even the customers you're working, that they're expecting things to be delivered on time, that doesn't happen. Then your stress starts to kick in as well. And that can be things that are really not nice to happen. And then everyone suffers. So as a leader, if you suffer, unless you're made of steel, it will also bleed out to your team because you're not going to show up as much. You maybe take a step back, and some of the more emotionally focused people will pick up on that in your team, and they may drive a downward spiral of motivation and belonging. It says, well, if he's bad, man, for one is they don't ever want to be a leader because, man, I don't want to be in his shoes. Look at what he's doing for him, right? And so it is a tough job, and especially with the pandemic, as you said, where most of the teams then became virtual. You didn't have this human bonding that was very helpful in those situations, right? And for many, it continues on because virtual work has now almost become the norm, especially as more and more of the teams are dispersed. I guess legacy, when money was flowing everywhere, you could have a team in every city with a leader in every city. Reality, economics now is very different. You can't afford that, so you have a leader across multiple cities, or even across country, or hell, even across the globe, right?
That's right.
And getting that famous sense of belonging, it gets more and more an issue, and it's easy for a leader to lose touch with their own individuals as well, right? Because when people were local in your city, you saw them at the water cooler, at the coffee, you don't look right, but it's hard now, virtualized. So you have to develop now new ways of sensing how people are, even force the conversation. How are you? What's going on with you, right? But yeah, your leader is someone important, and when that goes bad, it can infect the rest of the organization and have extremely negative results for sure.
Absolutely. No, that's great, JF. That's a great way to put it. Now, and it's a great segment into my next question is how should people work on their personal development? What steps should they take?
Yeah, sure. I think it's to accept that it's not that it's necessary, but it's very helpful, right? Is we all need to learn more about ourselves. Again, I always come back to the humility, right? And I think the personal development does depend on where you are in life, right? We talk about the early grads, right? Well, what do they need? Well, maybe more focus how you manage your career, how you look at different opportunities. When you're in your the mid or the middle of your career, maybe you are setting yourself up for promotion. So what do I need, as a person? Do I need to learn about stress and anxiety, leadership, very, higher leadership skills? Um, and I guess as maturity grows, you learn that, actually being a better person is great for the job, but it's also great everywhere else, right? So being happy at home, in the community, in your sports team is important. So personal development doesn't just apply, of course, to your job, right?
Yes.
And I think more and more, as I'm almost 50 soon, right? You get closer, not to retirement. I don't think retirement for me exists. It's just a continuation, right? Is
Yes.
that personal development will help you understand, or why you may feel that you're incomplete, that you're not able to I don't know, contribute as much as you'd like to the world, right? And so for me is important. I've took a lot of training in that sense, reading books, podcasts, of course. Hey, um, and I've also had mentors and coaches, right? So I think for me it helps you give a 360 view of your career and yourself. And when you feel better, it protects you from the outside, right? Something in the job has gone bad, or you've had an accident, or even the home is more difficult. When you are on a very firm and short footing in your own person, you're able to take on much more stress, anxiety, and actually also have the skills to deal with them, right? Because anxiety and stress, at least in the workplace and even in your own life, will always be there. It's how you show up, how you deal with it, and to a certain extent, how you are able to prevent it, knowing what it does to you, and what are the early signs that they can be avoidable. So personal development coaching for me is very important, and it's certainly something that I'd like to explore myself and help other people being a better version of themselves for the next few years of their lives.
Awesome. Thank you, JF. And the last thing before we wrap this up, I want to ask you is, what is your unconventional definition of leadership?
Sure. How about this? Sometimes I'm a bit philosophical, so I have some weird ways of saying this. But I'd say, how about leadership being defined as a imperfect person's journey in empowering others to go where they need to be.
Nice.
Right, in all aspects of life, right? In job, your family, again, the community. Leadership is not only a professional skill set; it is across your whole life. Never forgetting to also be a leader to yourself, right? That's very important. We tend to forget. I mean, sometimes I feel these weird things that you're completely lost at home, and says, well, wait a minute, I've solved this in the office, so why am I not applying the same things in my personal life to fix a situation? Says, yes, well, that's it, right? It's a universal skill set that you apply pretty much everywhere in your life, and just apply it in a different way depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
That's right. No, that's excellent. I want to thank you so much again. I've personally learned a lot from you, and this is what I tell people, that there's so much experience and knowledge out there, and this is why these podcasts are so great, where you can actually learn a lot in like about an hour, where you'd have to read so many books and watch so many videos and go to so many trainings. This kind of expedites your journey in leadership. And if you truly want to learn, various aspects of leadership, talking to people is so beneficial. And that's why, mentorship and coaching is so important too. But again, thank you very much for your time, JF. This was fantastic. I loved it. And for those that have any questions for JF, when this podcast comes out, you can always reach out, and I'll make sure that I'll send those questions to JF to address. And if JF wants, I can share his information, at the bottom of the comment section as well. So again, thanks for everyone for joining in today's podcast, and hope to see you in the next one. And JF, again, have yourself a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.